The scandal did not break with photographs or leaked messages. It began with whispers, the kind that circulate quietly in production corridors long before they ever reach the public. Crew members noticed changes in routine, subtle but persistent, enough to make seasoned professionals uneasy. When patterns repeat without explanation, people start paying attention. At first, no one wanted to say Sam Heughan's name out loud. He had long been known as careful, disciplined, and intensely protective of his private life. Rumors had followed him for years, but none had ever gained traction. This time, however, the silence surrounding the situation felt different, heavier. What unsettled people most was how well hidden everything appeared. There were no public slip-ups, no obvious breaches of behavior during official appearances. Instead, the signs emerged off camera, in moments never meant for fans or press. Disappearances between takes, altered schedules, and a noticeable tightening of security raised questions no one could answer directly. Behind the scenes of Outlander, relationships are built under intense conditions. Long hours, emotionally demanding scenes, and years of shared history blur boundaries faster than most people realize. For actors at the center of such a phenomenon, separating performance from reality becomes increasingly difficult. That environment creates vulnerability, even for those who believe they are in control. Sources close to the production described a growing sense of discomfort. It wasn't about jealousy or conflict, but about uncertainty. Sam appeared more guarded than usual, less present during downtime, as if carrying something he didn't want to share. When colleagues asked casual questions, he deflected with professionalism, never defensive but clearly closed off. The phrase, hidden romance, began circulating quietly. Not as an accusation, but as an explanation people reached for when nothing else fit. Whatever was happening, it wasn't meant to be seen, and the effort to keep it that way only intensified curiosity. In an industry where secrets rarely survive long, concealment itself becomes suspicious. What complicated matters further was timing. This alleged romance didn't emerge during early seasons, when boundaries were still forming, but years into the show's run. By then, expectations were rigid, roles were defined, and public narratives were deeply entrenched. Any deviation, no matter how personal, carried amplified consequences. Those closest to Sam reportedly urged caution. They understood the pressure he was under and the risk of allowing anything private to intersect with a franchise of this magnitude. Once speculation attaches itself to a long-running series, it rarely stays contained. Careers, reputations, and creative dynamics can all be affected. Sam, however, remained silent. He did not deny anything, nor did he attempt to redirect attention. That silence wasn't careless, it was calculated. Speaking too soon could escalate the situation, while denying it outright might invite further scrutiny. As rumors continued to circulate, fans sensed a shift. Online discussions grew sharper, not because of confirmed information, but because something felt off. Longtime viewers are adept at detecting subtle changes in energy, especially when they involve actors they have followed for years. The absence of clarity only fueled interpretation. The idea that a romance could exist behind Outlander struck a nerve. The series itself is built on intense emotional connection, loyalty, and forbidden love. The possibility that similar dynamics might be unfolding off-screen blurred lines many fans preferred to keep separate. Fiction and reality began overlapping in uncomfortable ways. Industry insiders warned that this kind of speculation rarely ends quietly. Even unfounded rumors can shift how productions operate, forcing new boundaries and precautions. For someone like Sam Heughan, whose public image is closely tied to restraint and reliability, the risk was not scandal alone but erosion of trust. Yet nothing definitive surfaced. No names were confirmed, no details leaked, no confrontation became public. That absence of resolution only deepened the intrigue. When a story refuses to reveal itself, people assume there is more to hide. By the time the rumor reached wider awareness, it had already evolved. It was no longer just about whether a romance existed, but about what it meant if it did. Questions emerged about pressure, isolation, and the cost of living inside a character for too long. The scandal became less about gossip and more about vulnerability. What remained undeniable was the tension. Something had disrupted the carefully maintained equilibrium behind Outlander. Whether the romance was real or merely assumed, its impact was already being felt. And as long as Sam Heughan chose silence, the story would continue growing in the spaces between what was seen and what was never meant to be discovered. The aftermath of the revelation did not unfold like a typical celebrity scandal. There were no frantic denials, no rushed statements, and no attempts to redirect the narrative. Instead, what followed was a prolonged silence that felt intentional rather than defensive. That silence alone suggested that whatever had been uncovered was not easily dismissed. Behind the scenes of Outlander, the atmosphere reportedly shifted. Cast and crew became more guarded, conversations shorter, and boundaries more clearly enforced. This was not panic, but caution, as if everyone understood that a line had already been crossed. When productions tighten like that, it usually means the truth is complicated, not fabricated. What fueled the scandal further was how closely it aligned with long-standing rumors. Fans had speculated for years about unspoken connections, unexplained tension, and moments that felt too real to be scripted. Those theories were often dismissed as wishful thinking or projection. Now, the timing of this revelation made those old doubts feel suddenly relevant. At the center of it all was Sam Heughan, whose public image had always been carefully controlled. He had built a reputation on discretion, professionalism, and emotional restraint. That consistency made the idea of a hidden romance more shocking, not less. Scandals feel louder when they contradict everything people believe they know. The situation became even more delicate because of Katrina Balfe. Though the scandal did not explicitly name her as part of the romance, her proximity to the story was impossible to ignore. Every shared scene, every past interview, every moment of on-screen intensity was re-examined through a new lens. Silence from her side only deepened the speculation. Insiders described the romance as something that existed in fragments. Not a reckless affair, but a connection carefully hidden, shaped by timing, pressure, and circumstance. According to those accounts, the secrecy was not driven by thrill, but by fear of consequences. In that context, the scandal looked less like betrayal and more like exposure. What complicated matters was the emotional weight attached to the series itself. Outlander was not just a job, it had defined years of their lives and identities. Lines between character and reality had blurred long ago, making any off-screen intimacy inherently dangerous. Crossing that boundary meant risking not only reputation, but stability. As public discussion intensified, reactions divided sharply. Some fans felt vindicated, convinced they had seen it coming all along. Others felt uncomfortable, arguing that private lives should remain private regardless of rumors. The divide was not about morality, but about entitlement to the truth. Notably, there was no attempt to exploit the scandal. No exclusive interviews surfaced, no dramatic leaks followed, and no tell-all narratives emerged. That restraint suggested mutual agreement among those involved to contain the fallout. When everyone chooses silence, it often means the stakes are higher than attention. Industry observers pointed out an important detail. Careers were not derailed overnight, projects were not cancelled, and professional relationships remained intact. That stability implied that whatever had occurred was known internally long before it became public. Scandals that surprise insiders tend to cause far more damage. Over time, the conversation shifted from what happened to why it mattered. The romance itself became less shocking than the environment that allowed it to stay hidden for so long. Fame, isolation, and emotional dependency within intense productions create conditions where boundaries erode quietly. The scandal exposed that reality more than it exposed individuals. For Sam, the cost was subtle but real. His silence was interpreted as acceptance rather than denial, and his image gained complexity it had never carried before. He was no longer seen only as controlled and distant, but as human and fallible. That shift, once made, cannot be undone. For Katrina, the impact was quieter but heavier. She continued working, speaking carefully, and avoiding direct engagement with the rumors. Yet the scrutiny around her presence intensified, as if the public expected answers she never offered. Sometimes silence protects dignity, even as it feeds curiosity. In the end, the scandal did not explode the way headlines predicted. It simmered, changed tone, and settled into the background of a much larger story. What remained was not proof, but implication, not confession, but consequence. And sometimes, that is far more unsettling. Because the most dangerous scandals are not the ones shouted aloud. They are the ones everyone senses, everyone avoids naming, and everyone knows will never be fully explained. In that space, the truth doesn't disappear, it simply learns how to live in shadow.